In the 5th century before Christ, a fleet of ships from the mighty seafaring nation of Carthage set out on one of the most daring adventures in the ancient world. Their leader was a man history remembers as Hanno the Navigator, a Carthaginian explorer whose courage and curiosity would take him beyond the limits of the known map. Leaving behind the familiar waters of the Mediterranean, Hanno's fleet ventured west through the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and into the endless Atlantic Ocean. From there, they turned south, hugging the coast of Africa, sailing into lands that no Carthaginian, and perhaps no Mediterranean sailor, had ever seen before. This voyage wasn't just an act of exploration. It was part colonization, part trade mission, and part scientific wonder. Hanno kept a detailed logbook of the journey, one of the rare first-hand records of exploration from the ancient world. His account describes the founding of new colonies, the opening of trade routes, encounters with unknown peoples, and, perhaps most intriguingly, what may have been the first written description of guerrillas in history. Carthage and the quest for wealth. By Hanno's time, Carthage had grown into the undisputed naval power of the Western Mediterranean. Founded centuries earlier by Phoenician settlers, it inherited their love for long-distance sailing and trade. By 500 BC, Carthaginian merchants controlled major sea routes from Spain to Sicily, but the hunger for new wealth, particularly West African gold, pushed them to look beyond the known horizon. Gold was Carthage's lifeblood. It flowed north across the Sahara through harsh overland trade routes. If Hanno could find a sea route to the source of that gold, Carthage could bypass the middlemen and grow unimaginably rich. At the same time, Carthage's population was swelling. Founding new coastal colonies in Africa could ease that pressure and expand Carthaginian influence. So the city's council approved an ambitious expedition. Hanno's fleet reportedly consisted of around 60 ships, carrying sailors, soldiers, and colonists. His own record claims an impossible 30,000 people, a number most historians believe was exaggerated. Even if it was only a fraction of that, it was still one of the largest exploratory missions ever launched in the ancient world. Through the Pillars of Hercules, with the wind at their backs, Hanno's ships passed through the legendary Pillars of Hercules and out into the great Atlantic. The open sea stretched before them, vast, unpredictable, and terrifyingly unknown. The first leg of the voyage took them along what is now the Moroccan coast. Within days, Hanno established the expedition's first colony, called Thymiaterion, likely near modern-day Casablanca. More settlements followed, trading outposts with names like Karakon, Git, Accra, Melita, and Arambis. Each new colony served as a stepping stone further south, a safe harbor for ships and a growing network of Carthaginian power. Archaeological evidence of Punic artifacts along this coastline today supports much of Hanno's account, giving it weight beyond legend. But the deeper they sailed into unfamiliar waters, the more Hanno's writing began to resemble a journey into myth. The land of elephants sailing south from their colonies. Hanno and his men came upon a wide river, the Lixos, likely the modern Drea River, in southern Morocco. There they met a pastoral tribe known as the Lixites, who herded cattle along the riverbanks. The locals welcomed the visitors, traded food with them, and even provided interpreters for the journey ahead. Beyond the Lixos, the coast grew hotter and wilder. The vegetation thickened, and the men began to see great beasts grazing among the reeds. Hanno wrote of elephants, crocodiles, and hippos, animals he had never seen before. These details, described centuries before scientific zoology existed, prove that Carthaginians truly reached sub-Saharan ecosystems, where hippos and other tropical species thrived. the edge of the known world. Continuing south for days, the fleet reached a wide bay, possibly modern Arguing Bay, off the coast of Mauritania. On a small island there, they founded another settlement, Kern, described by Hanno as the farthest outpost of Carthage. He noted something remarkable. Kern lay directly opposite Carthage, meaning the time taken to sail there equaled the time taken from Carthage to the Strait of Gibraltar. For Hanno, this was the edge of the known world. Beyond Kern lay only mystery. Yet Hanno pressed onward. Sailing past barren deserts, he described rivers swarming with crocodiles and hippos, and distant hills that glowed red under the African sun. Then, for 12 long days, the fleet sailed south into completely uncharted territory. The languages of the people they met changed, even the interpreters could no longer understand them. Strange music echoed from the coasts, fires blazed across the night horizon, and eerie sounds filled the darkness. One night, anchored near shore, Hanno's men heard drums, cymbals, and chanting drifting over the water. Terrified, they begged their commander to leave at first light. The chariot of the gods. Not long after, the explorers encountered a terrifying sight. The coastline itself appeared to be on fire. The sea glowed red with reflected flame, and the sky above was filled with smoke. As daylight broke, they realized they were witnessing a massive volcanic eruption. They named the towering mountain the Chariot of the Gods. Modern historians believe this was Mount Cameroon, an active volcano that still towers over the West African coast today, -13,000 feet tall, with lava flows that can reach the sea. If true, Hanno's fleet had made it as far as the Gulf of Guinea, more than 2,500 miles from Carthage, a feat unmatched for nearly 2,000 years. The encounter with the Gorillai. Sailing onward, Hanno's log describes an encounter that would become one of history's most debated episodes. In a bay near what is likely modern-day Gabon, the explorers landed on an island inhabited by hairy, savage creatures. The Greek translation of Hanno's record calls them Gorillai. The Carthaginians tried to capture the creatures. The males fought fiercely, throwing stones from the hills. The sailors managed to seize 3 females, but they were so aggressive that the crew killed them. Their skins were taken back to Carthage as proof of what they had seen, and displayed in the Temple of Tanit for centuries, until the city's destruction by Rome in 146 BC. Most historians today believe Hanno's men had indeed encountered gorillas or chimpanzees, making this the earliest written record of those animals in human history. The descriptions fit perfectly. The size difference between males and females, the hair-covered bodies, and their defensive behavior. The Greek word gorillai, in fact, is the origin of the modern name gorilla. The return journey. Supplies were running low. With no knowledge of what lay ahead, and fearing the sea's wrath, Hanno decided to turn back. The return trip was grueling. The fleet had to battle strong Atlantic currents and headwinds, which made northward sailing painfully slow. The men rowed for weeks, hugging the coast, stopping to rest at the colonies they had founded. Eventually, they made it home, battered, but alive, to the proud harbor of Carthage. A legacy of discovery. Hanno's expedition remains one of antiquity's most astonishing achievements. His voyage stretched thousands of miles beyond the known world, describing lands, animals, and volcanoes that perfectly match real geography. For centuries, skeptics dismissed his tale as myth. But modern evidence, from ancient ruins to geographical accuracy, now confirms that Hanno's record is based on a real voyage. Roman authors, like Pliny the Elder, later exaggerated the story, claiming Hanno had sailed all the way around Africa to Arabia. That's likely untrue, but even his verified journey stands as a monumental accomplishment. Hanno's courage and curiosity pushed human understanding to the very edge of the map, and his encounter with the mysterious gorilla bridged the gap between ancient myth and modern science. Over 2,500 years later, his voyage still captures our imagination, a testament to how far human beings will go to seek what lies beyond the horizon. In the cradle of civilization, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, lies one of the greatest riddles of ancient history, a mystery that has haunted scholars for centuries. It's the story of Akkad, the lost capital of the world's very first empire, and the man who built it, Sargon of Akkad, conqueror, reformer, and founder of a new world order. More than 4,000 years ago, long before Babylon, long before Rome, there was Akkad, a city so powerful that it united all of Mesopotamia under a single crown. Yet today, no one knows where it once stood. Rise of a world's first emperor around 2340 BC. Sargon rose from humble origins, a royal cupbearer turned conqueror, who seized power from the Sumerian king of Kish. His victories would forever change history. Sargon did something no ruler before him had ever done. He forged an empire, bringing together dozens of warring city-states, Ur, Uruk, Lagash, under one unified rule. To govern this vast domain, Sargon established his capital city, Akkad, somewhere in central Mesopotamia. From there, he ruled not as a city king, but as an emperor, the first in recorded history. He placed Akkadian governors across conquered lands, introduced a centralized administration, and organized one of the first professional standing armies, numbering perhaps 5,000 soldiers. It was in this moment that humanity shifted from the age of local kings to the era of empires. A cultural revolution. Sargon's rule was more than political conquest. It was cultural transformation. Under his leadership, the Akkadian language replaced Sumerian as the official tongue of administration. It became the new language of empire, used in royal decrees, taxes, and diplomacy. The Akkadians also reimagined religion. Sargon declared Ishtar, the goddess of war and love, as his dynasty's divine protector. His daughter, Enheduanna, served as high priestess of Yor and became the first named author in human history. She composed hymns that blended Sumerian and Akkadian beliefs into a single shared vision, laying the foundation for Mesopotamia's unified spiritual identity. Power, prosperity, and art. Akkad wasn't just a political capital, it was a hub of trade and innovation. Merchants carried gold, lapis lazuli, cedarwood, and precious stones from lands as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia. Art and sculpture flourished. The Akkadians pioneered a new realism. Rulers were no longer flat depictions on clay tablets, but lifelike bronze faces with emotion and authority. One such masterpiece, the bronze head of Sargon, still stands as a symbol of power and craftsmanship, over 4 millennia later. The God King and the Fall. After Sargon, his grandson, Naram-Sin, took Akkad to its greatest heights, and, ironically, to its breaking point. Naram-Sin was a fierce conqueror who expanded the empire even further. His victories were immortalized on the victory stele of Naram-Sin, where he is shown trampling enemies beneath his feet, and, shockingly, wearing a horned crown reserved for the gods. In that moment, Naram-Sin declared himself a living god, the first Mesopotamian king to do so. But his arrogance would sow the seeds of ruin. Soon after his death, the empire began to unravel. Internal revolts, foreign invasions, and possibly a devastating drought pushed Akkad into chaos. By 2150 BC, the once great empire collapsed. Sumerian texts later claimed that the gods had punished Akkad for its hubris. The Curse of Akkad, a poem from that era, blames the fall on divine wrath for the king's pride. The vanished city, what happened next, deepens the mystery. Over time, the empire faded, and so did its capital. Akkad, the glittering heart of the ancient world, simply disappeared. Unlike Ur or Babylon, which left behind towering ruins, Akkad left no trace. Its bricks, its palaces, its temples, all gone. For centuries, archaeologists have searched the plains between Baghdad and Saqqara, believing the lost city lies buried somewhere beneath modern Iraq. Texts hint that Akkad stood near the junction of major rivers, possibly where the Tigris meets the Djala or the Adheim. Others believe it may have been near Kish or Sippar, ancient trade centers along the Euphrates. The most compelling clue came in the 1800s, when explorer Claudius Rich found a fragment of a black statue base near Tel al-Sadia, north of modern Baghdad. It bore an Akkadian inscription, possibly belonging to Remosh, Sargon's son. Could this fragment be a remnant of the lost city? Or was it merely an artifact carried there long after Akkad's fall? No one knows. Swallowed by time. One reason Akkad remains hidden may be the rivers themselves. Over thousands of years, the Tigris and Euphrates have shifted course again and again, burying entire cities under layers of silt. Akkad might lie deep beneath the alluvial plain, entombed by the rivers that once nourished it. Another possibility is destruction. Ancient enemies could have razed Akkad to the ground. Its ruins scavenged for bricks, its name erased by those who sought revenge against its kings. Whatever the cause, Akkad vanished so completely that by the time of Babylon, even its location was forgotten. Legacy of the First Empire, though the city is lost, its legacy endures. The Akkadian Empire shaped the very idea of kingship and statehood. It gave the world its first standing army, its first empire-wide bureaucracy, and the first ruler to claim divine right. Even after its fall, later powers like Babylon and Assyria revered Akkad's kings as legends. Sargon and Naram-Sin became symbols of divine might, remembered in myths, copied in inscriptions, and quoted by kings who sought to inherit their glory. Over 1,000 years after Akkad's fall, Babylonian scribes still studied Akkadian texts, calling their rulers model kings of a golden age. Even conquerors like Hammurabi and Ashurbanipal looked back to Akkad for inspiration, the empire that began it all. The hunt for Akkad continues today. Archaeologists and historians are still searching for the lost capital. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and drone mapping have revealed promising sites along the central Mesopotamian plain, but no definitive discovery yet. Each year, new excavations get closer, and one day, a broken tablet or an inscribed brick may finally reveal the truth. The coordinates of Akkad, the first imperial city in history. Until then, Akkad remains more legend than location, a vanished capital that once ruled the world, and then was swallowed whole by the sands of time. In the blazing heart of the Sahara, under a merciless African sun, a small Roman expedition marched south into lands no European had ever seen before. Their armor shimmered in the heat. Their sandals sank into endless dunes. And before them stretched a horizon that seemed to have no end. At their head rode a man named Septimius Flaccus, an officer of Rome, tasked with chasing raiders who had dared to attack the empire's distant African frontier. But this pursuit would become something far greater. It would turn into one of the boldest and most mysterious journeys of the ancient world, an expedition that may have reached Lake Chad, nearly 2,000 kilometers beyond the edge of the known map. This is the forgotten story of the first Romans to step deep into the African interior, a journey so strange that even ancient historians could barely believe it. The empire looks south. By the 1st century, Rome's empire stretched from the chilly moors of Britain to the scorching deserts of North Africa. Along the Mediterranean coast of modern Libya lay the prosperous Roman cities of Leptis Magna, Sabratha, and Oa, the jewels of the province of Africa Proconsularis. These cities thrived on trade. Gold, ivory, exotic animals, and slaves arrived through long Saharan caravans, goods that connected sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. But beyond those trade routes lay danger. The desert was ruled by fierce nomadic tribes and by the mysterious Garamantes, a powerful Berber kingdom centered in the Fezzan region of the Sahara. Though Roman authors often described them as mere desert bandits, the Garamantes were no savages. They had a capital city, Garama, and had built vast underground irrigation systems, tunnels that carried water to their oases, allowing their civilization to flourish in the middle of the desert. They were both traders and raiders, sometimes Rome's partners, sometimes its enemies. When Garamantian-backed raiders began attacking Roman supply lines near Leptis Magna, Rome decided to strike back. The mission of Septimius. Around 50 AD, the Roman governor ordered a counteroffensive and placed Septimius Flaccus in command. Flaccus was not a famous general. His background remains obscure. Some say he was a local Romanized officer, others that he was an equestrian commander stationed in North Africa. What we know is that he had authority, discipline, and the courage to lead men into the unknown. His orders were simple: punish the raiders, secure the frontier. But what Flaccus achieved went far beyond any military assignment. Into the Sahara, Flaccus gathered his force, a detachment of Roman legionaries, African auxiliaries, and local desert guides. They loaded supplies onto camels, filled amphorae with water, and marched south from Leptis Magna. As they advanced, the familiar world of Rome faded behind them. Marble villas and olive groves gave way to dunes, cliffs, and the endless wasteland of the Fezzan Desert. For days they trekked from oasis to oasis, moving by night to avoid the deadly sun. Their route likely followed ancient caravan paths known to traders through the oases of Gadams and Gima, then deep into Garamantian territory. At first, the Garamantes resisted. They had chariots drawn by swift desert horses and struck fast before vanishing into the dunes. But Roman discipline prevailed. After several skirmishes, Flaccus' troops crushed the raiders and subdued the Garamantian outposts. Rome's power had reached farther south than ever before. Yet, instead of turning back, Flaccus made a fateful decision to keep going. March to the unknown, victorious but restless, Flaccus pushed beyond the edge of Garamantian lands into a desert no Roman had ever crossed. His guides spoke of mountains to the south, and a vast inland sea beyond them, a lake so large it seemed like an ocean. The Romans were intrigued. Could this be the source of the Nile, or a route to rich, unexplored kingdoms? Driven by curiosity and duty, they pressed on. For weeks, the column marched under the burning sky. The sand turned to black volcanic rock, and the heat rose from the ground like fire. At last, the soldiers reached a jagged chain of peaks, the Tibesti Mountains of modern Chad. Their dark basalt slopes rose sharply from the desert, a strange and alien sight to Roman eyes. The soldiers had crossed into one of the most remote regions on earth, the lake of hippopotamuses and rhinoceroses. After crossing the Tibesti Range, the expedition descended into savanna country. And there, shimmering on the horizon, they saw it, a vast freshwater lake, alive with wildlife. The men stood in awe. They had discovered what we now know as Lake Chad, though at the time it was much larger than it is today, a sprawling inland sea. The Romans called it Lacus hippopotamorum et rhinocerotum, the lake of the hippopotamus and rhinoceros. For soldiers who had spent months in blistering desert, the sight must have seemed like paradise. The waters teemed with fish, and herds of elephants and rhinos roamed the shores. They had reached a land that was, in every sense, beyond the world they knew. Among the peoples of Aegium, ancient geographer Ptolemy later wrote that Flaccus reached a region called Aguzimba, inhabited by dark-skinned peoples and wild beasts. He described it as lying far south of the Garamontes, near the Great Lake. Flaccus' men likely made peaceful contact with the local inhabitants, trading Roman goods, glass beads, metalwork, or wine, for food and guidance. There's no record of conflict. Instead, the Romans appear to have rested there, marveling at the fertile land after months of hardship. They had marched from the marble villas of Leptis Magna to the heart of Africa, farther than any Roman had ever gone. The long road home, eventually, their supplies dwindled. Flaccus ordered the retreat north. The return journey was brutal. The men battled sandstorms, thirst, and exhaustion. The camels collapsed one by one, and water became more precious than gold. Some historians believe the Romans may have left a small outpost or garrison near the lake, though no trace has been found. Others think they returned home exhausted but victorious. Their story recorded by later geographers, when they finally reached the Roman frontier again, they had achieved the impossible, crossing the Sahara and returning alive. The aftermath back in North Africa, Flaccus' campaign was hailed as a triumph. The raiders were punished, and peace returned to Leptis Magna's trade routes. Yet his achievement received little recognition in Rome itself. No triumphal parade, no monuments. His name appeared only in fragments of geographical works, centuries later, a quiet ghost in the pages of history. But the echoes of his journey lived on. Roman geographers like Ptolemy recorded new details about Africa, vast lakes, great rivers, and rich lands to the south, all likely based on reports from Flaccus' expedition. For the first time, Rome understood that beyond the Sahara lay not empty desert, but vibrant civilizations and fertile lands. The evidence and debate, so did Septimius Flaccus truly reach Lake Chad? Modern historians are divided. On one hand, the ancient account matches the geography perfectly. The Tibesti Mountains, the open savanna, and the Great Lake filled with hippos and rhinos. No other location fits the description so well. Roman coins from the 1st and 2nd centuries AD have even been found in parts of Chad and Niger, possible remnants of this journey or of later trade inspired by it. On the other hand, skeptics argue that Flaccus may have sent scouts or native auxiliaries farther south while remaining behind himself. Some details could have come second-hand through traders rather than direct observation. Either way, the consistency of Ptolemy's data suggests that someone, whether Flaccus or his men, really did see that great lake with their own eyes. Legacy of the Roman explorers, even without monuments, Flaccus' expedition left a deep mark on the Roman imagination. It proved that Africa did not end at the desert's edge. It hinted at the existence of a vast, living world beyond the empire's borders. A world full of resources, mystery, and wonder. Later, Roman commanders, like Gaius Valerius Festus, would follow similar routes south to suppress the Garamontes and push Rome's reach even further into the Sahara. Though the empire never colonized sub-Saharan Africa, the echoes of Flaccus' journey endured for centuries, whispered in Roman maps, retold in travelers' tales, and rediscovered by explorers nearly 2,000 years later. A forgotten hero, Septimius Flaccus, never became a household name. No marble statue bears his likeness. No epic poem immortalized his march. but his expedition stands as one of the great unsung adventures of the Roman age, a feat of endurance, courage, and relentless curiosity. In an age when most believed the Sahara marked the end of the world, Flaccus and his men crossed it and found a new world waiting beyond. In the ancient valleys of the Yellow River, long before Rome was founded, long before the pyramids had weathered their first storms, a great civilization arose. Its emperors claimed not only the right to rule, but something far greater, the blessing of heaven itself. This is the story of an idea so powerful that it shaped the destiny of China for over 3,000 years. The mandate of heaven, a divine mystery that decided who ruled, who fell, and when an entire dynasty's time had come to an end. The birth of a divine idea more than 3,000 years ago. China was ruled by the Shang dynasty, a civilization of bronze, warriors, and blood sacrifices. Their kings claimed descent from the gods, and ruled by divine favor alone. But, around 1046 BC, a new power rose. The Zhou, led by King Wu, they overthrew the Shang in one of the most important revolutions in Chinese history. When the Zhou claimed victory, they faced a problem: how to justify the overthrow of a dynasty that claimed divine ancestry. Their answer would echo through eternity. The Zhou declared that the Shang had lost heaven's approval because of their corruption and cruelty. Heaven Tian, the supreme cosmic power, had withdrawn its favor and given it to the Zhou. This concept became known as Tianming, or the mandate of heaven, a moral contract between the ruler and the universe itself. If a king governed with justice and virtue, heaven would bless his reign. But if he ruled with greed, violence, or neglect, heaven would send warnings, natural disasters, floods, earthquakes, famine, until the ruler was overthrown. In the eyes of the Chinese people, rebellion wasn't just political, it was divine justice. The cosmic contract, the mandate of heaven, was unlike anything in the ancient world. In Egypt, kings ruled as gods. In Mesopotamia, they ruled by the favor of gods. But in China, the ruler was accountable to heaven, and heaven to the people. This idea turned the cosmos into a moral system. It gave the people a reason to endure hardship and a reason to rebel when the balance was broken. Every dynasty that rose afterward would claim the mandate. Every dynasty that fell would be said to have lost it. The dynastic cycle, the Zhou's vision, gave birth to one of the most enduring patterns in history, the dynastic cycle. It began with a virtuous leader who earned heaven's mandate, a founder who brought peace, justice, and prosperity. Then came generations of stability, strong rulers, expanding borders, flourishing trade. But over time, corruption would creep in. The court grew greedy. Taxes rose. The poor starved. Heaven's displeasure would be shown through omens, droughts, floods, rebellions. Finally, the empire would collapse, and a new leader would rise, claiming that heaven had chosen him instead. In this way, the mandate of heaven became not only a religious idea, but a theory of revolution. It explained why empires fell, and gave legitimacy to whoever replaced them. The Zhou dynasty and the warning signs the Zhou themselves lasted for centuries, from the 11th century BC to 256 BC, one of the longest dynasties in world history. But even they were not immune to heaven's judgment. Over time, Zhou kings lost control of their feudal lords. The empire fractured into warring states, and chaos engulfed China. During these turbulent centuries, philosophers like Confucius and Mencius reflected deeply on the mandate of heaven. Confucius taught that rulers should govern through virtue, rather than fear or punishment. Mencius went further, saying that if a ruler became a tyrant, the people had the right to overthrow him, for heaven had already withdrawn its favor. This moral code became the soul of Chinese governance. It wasn't the might of the sword that sustained power, but moral legitimacy, a sacred balance between heaven, earth, and the people. The fall and rebirth of empires, century after century, dynasty after dynasty, the pattern repeated, a rhythm that defined Chinese history. When the Qin dynasty rose in 221 BC under Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, his unification of the warring states seemed like proof of heaven's mandate. But his iron-fisted rule, forced labor, and the burning of books brought chaos after his death. The dynasty fell within a generation. The mandate, it was said, revoked. Then came the Han dynasty, a golden age of art, science, and empire. For 400 years, they ruled in peace, until corruption and rebellion tore them apart. Each collapse was not seen as random misfortune, but as heaven's verdict. Even natural disasters carried political weight. When rivers flooded, or locusts devoured the crops, the people would whisper, "Heaven is angry. The emperor has lost the mandate." Omens from heaven. Chinese chronicles are filled with tales of heavenly warnings. When the Shang grew corrupt, strange comets streaked across the sky. When the Han began to falter, solar eclipses darkened the sun at noon. Even the weather itself was seen as a divine message. In 36 BC, during the reign of Emperor Yuan of Han, an earthquake struck Chang'an, toppling temples. The emperor fasted in repentance, believing heaven was rebuking him for poor governance. Later dynasties followed this same ritual humility, fasting, issuing decrees of self-blame, or releasing prisoners when calamities struck. Heaven spoke through the elements, and the wise ruler listened. The eternal principle, what makes the mandate of heaven remarkable, is that it was never static. It could belong to anyone, a peasant, a general, a rebel, if they proved themselves virtuous and strong enough to restore order. This flexibility made Chinese civilization incredibly resilient. Even when one dynasty fell, the idea itself lived on, reborn through the next ruler who claimed heaven's favor. From the Zhou to the Tang, from the Ming to the Qing, the mandate of heaven remained the invisible law behind every throne. Even the great Mongol conqueror Kublai Khan, who founded the Yuan dynasty, claimed he had received the mandate. And centuries later, when revolutionaries overthrew the Qing in 1911, they too spoke of heaven's will, not as divine approval, but as the will of the people. The concept had transformed, yet endured. Legacy beyond time for over 3 millennia. The mandate of heaven guided China's politics, philosophy, and morality. It created a worldview in which power was never absolute, and where even the mightiest emperor could fall if he lost virtue. In a sense, it was the world's earliest form of moral accountability in governance, a celestial check on human power. Even today, echoes of that belief remain in Chinese culture. The idea that leadership must serve the people, that corruption invites downfall, and that legitimacy flows from justice, not force. The mystery of heavens will no one could ever see heaven's mandate. It was invisible, intangible, revealed only through the patterns of history. Dynasties rose and fell like tides, but the mandate endured, unseen yet all-powerful. For the ancient Chinese, this wasn't just politics, it was cosmic truth. Heaven's will was mysterious, but its justice was absolute. And in that belief, they found both comfort and fear, the sense that all empires, no matter how great, live only as long as heaven allows. The sands of Egypt hold secrets older than time itself. Beneath the golden dunes and temple ruins, whispers of a forgotten pharaoh still echo, a ruler erased from history, whose tomb may never have been meant to be found. This is the Pharaoh Mystery, a tale that blurs the line between legend, archaeology, and divine retribution. The lost pharaoh, for thousands of years, Egypt's kings were buried in splendor. Their tombs were built to defy decay, sealed chambers filled with gold, statues, and sacred texts meant to guide their souls through the afterlife. But not all pharaohs were honored with such glory. Some vanished completely from the royal lists, their names chiseled out from temple walls, their tombs destroyed or hidden. These erased pharaohs were victims of one of Egypt's most haunting traditions, damnatio memoria, the condemnation of memory. To erase a pharaoh's name was to destroy his soul. It was a fate worse than death. Eternal oblivion, the shadow of heretic kings. Among these lost rulers, few are as mysterious as Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh who defied the gods themselves. In the 14th century BC, Akhenaten abandoned Egypt's ancient religion and declared worship of a single deity, the Aten, the sun disk. He moved the capital to a new city, Amarna, and erased the names of other gods, including Ammon, the most sacred of all. For this, history turned against him. After his death, the priests and nobles destroyed his monuments, shattered his statues, and tried to wipe him from existence. Even his tomb was left half-finished, abandoned as if cursed. Centuries later, when his name reappeared in the ruins, it sent shockwaves through the world of archaeology. Who was this pharaoh who had tried to overthrow the gods themselves, and what fate had befallen him? The curse of the hidden tomb. Some say Akhenaten's body was moved in secret, buried in a hidden valley, protected by loyal followers who refused to let his soul be lost. Others believe he was reburied under a false name, perhaps even near his famous son Tutankhamun, the boy king who restored the old gods. Modern scans of the Valley of the Kings have revealed mysterious voids behind Tutankhamun's tomb, uncharted chambers that some Egyptologists think may conceal another royal burial. Could it be Akhenaten, or perhaps another erased pharaoh, one whose name never survived the centuries? The mystery endures. The sands remember. Every few decades, new discoveries bring fresh light. A fragment of a cartouche here, a hidden staircase there, each one whispering pieces of a story Egypt tried to forget. For all their power, even the pharaohs could not escape the final judgment of time. Their tombs were sealed to preserve their memory, yet, in trying to defy death, they ensured they would forever be pursued by it. The pharaohs believed that to speak a man's name was to give him life again. And so today, when we speak their names, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and the nameless kings erased by vengeance, we give them life once more. In 1898, deep inside a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt's vast necropolis of kings and priests, archaeologists unearthed something unexpected. It wasn't gold, it wasn't a mummy. It was a small wooden bird. At first glance, it seemed ordinary, a child's toy, perhaps, or a ritual object. But the more experts studied it, the more impossible it became to explain. Because this ancient wooden bird, carved more than 2,000 years before the birth of Christ, looked astonishingly like a modern airplane. The artifact was found in the tomb of Podimun, an Egyptian official and priest, dated around 200 BC. It was carved from sycamore wood, only about 7 inches long, with a short beak, tapered body, and precisely shaped wings that curved downward like those of a glider. It had no legs, unlike any bird sculpture of the time, but it did have a vertical tail fin, much like the rudder of an aircraft. Even the balance of its weight was perfect, centered just as in a plane designed for lift. The artifact was labeled simply bird-shaped object, and for decades it gathered dust in the Cairo Museum, unnoticed, until one man looked at it with different eyes. The engineer's revelation in 1969, Dr. Khalil Massaja, an Egyptian physician and aerodynamics enthusiast, happened upon the object while walking through the museum. He immediately froze. To him, this was no bird. It was a model glider, crafted with aerodynamic precision centuries before human flight was even imaginable. Dr. Messiah studied the artifact in detail and published a report arguing that it was evidence the ancient Egyptians understood the principles of flight. He noted that the design mirrored those of modern aircraft: a fuselage for lift, a stabilizing tail, and wings angled for balance. He even speculated that the original may have once had a horizontal tailplane, a missing piece that would have completed the design. To test his theory, modern engineers built replicas, and to everyone's surprise, the models actually flew. The debate takes flight. The revelation sparked intense debate among historians, scientists, and archaeologists. Could the ancient Egyptians have possessed aerodynamic knowledge thousands of years ahead of their time? Or was the resemblance purely coincidental, a symbolic bird representing the soul, known in Egyptian belief as the Ba? In ancient Egyptian religion, the Ba was the essence of a person's spirit, often depicted as a bird with a human head, capable of flying between the mortal world and the afterlife. Perhaps, some scholars argue, the Saqqara bird was never meant to fly through air, but through eternity, a symbol of the soul, or technology lost. To this day, the Saqqara bird remains one of Egypt's most enigmatic artifacts. No inscription explains its purpose. No twin artifacts have ever been found. To some, it is a ritual talisman, meant to help the soul soar to the heavens. To others, it is evidence of forgotten genius, a relic of an ancient scientist who dreamed of flight millennia before Da Vinci or the Wright brothers. What is certain is that its design defies its age. A tiny wooden sculpture, buried in silence for 2,000 years, now makes us question how much ancient civilizations truly knew. The message of the bird, whether it was a spiritual symbol or a technical marvel, the Saqqara bird speaks of the same longing that drives every human age: the desire to rise beyond limits, to reach the sky, to touch the divine. For the Egyptians, flight was the language of the soul, and in that sense, perhaps Imhotep's people already understood what it meant to transcend, not just through stone pyramids, but through dreams that took wing. More than 4,600 years ago, long before the Valley of the Kings, before Tutankhamun, before even the name Pharaoh echoed across the world, there lived a man whose mind seemed to touch the divine. His name was Imhotep, and he was not born a king, but something far greater. He was an architect, a healer, a sage, and a visionary who changed the course of Egyptian history. Centuries after his death, his wisdom was so revered that he was worshipped as a god, the god of wisdom, medicine, and architecture. Yet to this day, one of the greatest archaeological riddles remains unsolved. Where is Imhotep's tomb? The man who became a god, Imhotep, lived around 2600 BC. During the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, the first king of Egypt's third dynasty, at a time when most men were born into rigid social ranks, Imhotep rose from humble origins to become Djoser's most trusted advisor, his vizier, his chief architect, his high priest, and perhaps even his friend. He was a man of many firsts. Imhotep designed Egypt's first pyramid, the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, a masterpiece that transformed architecture forever. Before him, Egyptian kings were buried in low, rectangular tombs called mastubas. But Imhotep envisioned something new, a structure that reached upward, toward the heavens, like a stairway for the soul. The Step Pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a symbol of eternity. For the first time, stone was used not as mere decoration, but as architecture, and Egypt's age of pyramids was born. The genius of Saqqara, beneath the golden sun of Saqqara, Imhotep's design rose from the desert floor, 6 stacked layers of limestone blocks, rising over 200 feet high. It was surrounded by vast courtyards, temples, and storerooms, a sacred complex the size of a city. Every corridor and chamber within the pyramid was aligned with cosmic precision, echoing the stars above. In doing so, Imhotep transformed death into divine geometry and built the prototype for all future pyramids, including the Great Pyramid of Giza. His name was inscribed alongside Djoser's, an honor no commoner had ever received. In that moment, Imhotep became more than human. He became the immortal architect, the vanished tomb. And yet, for all his fame, Imhotep's final resting place has never been found. Egyptologists have searched for it for over a century, in the deserts around Saqqara, in the cliffs of Giza, even beneath Djoser's own pyramid, but the tomb of the man who built the first pyramid remains hidden. How could the burial place of one of Egypt's greatest figures vanish completely? Ancient records mention that Imhotep was buried in Saqqara, the necropolis of the kings. But thousands of tombs lie there, nobles, priests, officials, layer upon layer of history buried under the sand. Some believe his tomb lies within the cliffs near Serapeum, the sacred burial site of the Apis bulls, animals linked to the god Ptah, whom Imhotep served. Others suspect that it lies deep beneath the step pyramid itself, sealed away to protect his body and secrets from grave robbers. Archaeologists have found deep shafts near Saqqara, carved into the bedrock, leading to unexcavated chambers, possible entrances to a grand, hidden tomb. But none have yet yielded the name Imhotep. From man to myth, over time, Imhotep's legend only grew. 1,000 years after his death, Egyptians began to worship him as a god, the son of Pater, patron of wisdom and healing. They built temples in his honor, offered sacrifices for his guidance, and invoked his name in medical prayers. Even the Greeks, when they conquered Egypt, were awed by him. They called him Imhotep, and identified him with Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. In the ancient world, it was said that Imhotep could cure any illness, speak with the dead, and unlock the secrets of life itself. Yet his tomb, the bridge between man and God, remained hidden. The scrolls of healing, some fragments of papyrus found in later tombs, speak of the house of Imhotep, a place where priests studied medicine and anatomy. He was said to have written books, sacred medical texts, that taught physicians how to diagnose and heal with herbs, spells, and prayer. Though these writings are lost, echoes of his teachings appear in later Egyptian medical papyri, such as the Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the world's oldest surgical manuals. In its pages, we see the birth of scientific thought, practical observation, diagnosis, and treatment, all inspired by the mind of Imhotep. In a world ruled by superstition, he had already begun the path toward science. Clues in the desert. In the early 20th century, archaeologist Walter Emery uncovered a series of underground galleries in Saqqara filled with mummified ibises, birds sacred to the god Thoth. Among them, Emery found inscriptions dedicated to Imhotep, son of Pater, suggesting that pilgrims came here seeking healing long after his death. He believed the tomb of Imhotep might lie nearby, beneath the sands that still hide countless secrets. Even today, modern excavations in the Saqqara Plateau continue to reveal new tombs, some untouched for millennia. And every time a new shaft is opened, the world waits, hoping that the next name carved into the stone will finally be his. The eternal architect. Imhotep's story is not just one of brilliance, it is the story of a man who transcended mortality through creation. He built structures meant to last forever, and in doing so, he achieved immortality of a different kind. The pharaohs believed that to speak a name was to give it life, and though his tomb is lost, Imhotep's name is still spoken today, whispered in museums, temples, and universities across the world. No other architect in history has ever become a god. His life reminds us that true greatness is not born from power, but from knowledge, and from the vision to turn stone into eternity. More than 2,600 years ago, long before Columbus, long before Magellan, an ancient fleet set sail from the Red Sea with a mission that seemed impossible. They were to sail around the entire continent of Africa and return to Egypt. What followed would become one of the greatest maritime mysteries in human history. A journey so extraordinary that even the ancient Greeks doubted it could ever have happened. This is the story of Pharaoh Necho II's Great Voyage, an expedition that may have circumnavigated Africa 2 millennia before anyone else. A pharaoh with a vision. The tale begins around 600 BC, during the reign of Necho II, one of Egypt's most ambitious rulers. Necho was no ordinary pharaoh. He was an innovator, obsessed with technology, exploration, and trade. He ordered the construction of a canal linking the Nile to the Red Sea, a forerunner of the modern Suez Canal, and launched massive naval fleets into both the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. His goal was simple: to expand Egypt's influence, control trade routes, and bring back wealth from lands beyond the known world. But to do that, he needed to know what lay beyond the edges of the map. So Necho commissioned a voyage unlike any before, to sail from the Red Sea, follow the African coast southward, circle the entire continent, and return through the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, back to the Mediterranean. The Phoenician mariners, to lead this daring expedition, Necho turned to the best sailors of the ancient world, the Phoenicians, masters of shipbuilding and navigation. The Phoenicians had already established colonies across the Mediterranean, from Tyre to Carthage. They were merchants, explorers, and adventurers who understood the sea like no one else. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, writing nearly 2 centuries later, Necho's Phoenician fleet sailed from the Red Sea with enough provisions to last for years. They carried grain, water, tools, and seeds, for the pharaoh had given them strange instructions: wherever the season ends, sow your crops, harvest them, and then sail on. This meant the journey was not a single voyage, but a multi-year expedition, a moving colony at sea. Into the unknown the Phoenicians departed from Suez, sailing down the Red Sea. For weeks they hugged the coastline of Arabia, then turned south past modern-day Sudan and Eritrea, entering waters no Egyptian had ever charted. As they crossed the Horn of Africa, they encountered rougher seas and strange new lands. The people they met were darker-skinned, their speech unfamiliar, their boats made of papyrus and animal hide. When the winds turned against them, the sailors followed Necho's command. They came ashore, built small settlements, and planted crops. They waited for the harvest, replenished their supplies, and then continued south. For nearly 3 years, they journeyed, coasting along the eastern edge of Africa, past present-day Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Mozambique. And then, somewhere beyond the equator, they witnessed something that defied belief. The sun in the wrong sky. According to Herodotus, the Phoenicians later reported that as they sailed westward, the sun appeared on their right-hand side. To the Greeks, this was impossible proof. They said that the story was a lie. But today we know the truth. If the sailors had indeed crossed the southern hemisphere, the sun would have appeared to the north, to their right as they sailed west. It was a detail no ancient writer could have invented. A small clue that might prove the journey was real. The Cape of Storms rounding the southern tip of Africa. The fleet would have faced enormous danger. violent winds, towering waves, and treacherous currents around what we now call the Cape of Good Hope. No ancient ship was designed for such seas, and yet, if they survived, they would have entered calmer waters, the Atlantic Ocean, and begun the long journey northward. Following the western coast of Africa, the Phoenicians likely traded with local tribes, collected fresh water and food, and recorded new constellations in the night sky. Eventually, they reached the fertile lands of West Africa, and then continued north toward Morocco, their final destination. The return to Egypt. After nearly 3 years at sea, the fleet sailed through the Strait of Gibraltar and into the familiar blue of the Mediterranean. When they finally reached Egypt, their ships were battered, their sails torn, but they had done the impossible. They had circled the entire continent of Africa 2,000 years before the age of Columbus. Herodotus and the Mystery. Herodotus, the father of history, recorded their tale centuries later, after hearing it from Egyptian priests. He wrote that Necho's sailors were the first to prove that Africa was entirely surrounded by sea, though he admitted that he did not personally believe it. For the Greeks, the idea that the sun could appear in the north was absurd, but for modern historians, it's the strongest evidence that the voyage really happened. No later writer could have guessed such a phenomenon without first-hand experience. Evidence in the sand, while no direct archaeological proof of the voyage has been found. Pieces of the puzzle still hint at truth. Ancient Phoenician anchors discovered along the West African coast, similarities in ship carvings, and shared trade goods suggest ancient contact between the Mediterranean and sub-Saharan Africa. Even Egyptian artifacts, found as far south as Zimbabwe, may trace their origins to this same age of exploration. If true, then Necho's voyage was not just a story, it was the first circumnavigation of Africa. Accomplished in ships made of cedar and linen sails, guided only by stars and courage. The pharaoh who reached the edge of the world for Necho too. This was more than a feat of navigation. It was a vision of empire. He sought to unite the world through exploration, trade, and knowledge. Though he would die before the canal or the voyage's fame reached completion, his dream outlived him. The journey of his sailors became a legend whispered through millennia, rediscovered each time mankind reached for the unknown. Legacy of the voyage. Whether the expedition truly rounded Africa or not, its message is timeless. Humanity has always been driven by the same fire, the urge to see what lies beyond the horizon. For the Egyptians, that horizon was not just the sea, but the edge of the world itself. And when their ships disappeared into the sunlit waves of the Red Sea, they carried with them the eternal spirit of exploration, the spirit that built pyramids, mapped stars, and dreamed of eternity. Beneath the golden sands of Egypt lie not just the tombs of kings, but the untold stories of queens, women who ruled empires, defied gods, and changed the course of history. They were warriors, lovers, and visionaries. And yet, for all their power, most of their names were lost, their faces erased, their tombs hidden, their fates left shrouded in silence. This is the Egyptian Queen Mystery, a journey through the lives of the forgotten queens of the Nile, and the secrets they took with them to the grave. The queen who became pharaoh in the 15th century BC, Egypt was ruled not by a man, but by a woman, Hatshepsut, one of history's greatest monarchs. She was not content to rule as regent. She declared herself pharaoh, donned the false beard of kingship, and ordered herself portrayed in male form in temples and statues. Under her reign, Egypt flourished. Trade routes reopened, monuments rose across the land, and peace brought prosperity. But after her death, her legacy was systematically erased. Her stepson, Thutmose III, ordered her name chiseled from walls, her statues smashed, her images defaced. For centuries, it was as though she had never existed. Her tomb lay hidden for millennia, until archaeologists uncovered the magnificent temple of Deir el-Bahari, her masterpiece carved into the cliffs of Luxor. Even then, her mummy remained missing, a mystery that would haunt Egyptologists for decades. The discovery of the lost mummy in 2007, a breakthrough came. In a humble tomb in the Valley of the King's Tomb, KV60, researchers found an unmarked sarcophagus containing the body of an older woman. Her left arm was positioned across her chest, a royal pose. Nearby, in a separate box, lay a single tooth, perfectly matching the missing molar in the mummy's jaw. It was Hatshepsut. After more than 3,000 years, the queen who became pharaoh had been found. Her story, erased in life, had triumphed in death. The queen of Amarna, Nefertiti. If Hatshepsut was the queen who ruled, Nefertiti was the queen who changed faith itself. In the 14th century BC, she and her husband, Akhenaten, defied the entire Egyptian priesthood, proclaiming a new religion centered on one god, Aton, the sun disk. Nefertiti's beauty was legendary, immortalized in the famous bust discovered at Amarna. But behind that serene face was ambition and power. After Akhenaten's death, she vanished from history. Some say she died suddenly. Others whisper that she changed her name and ruled as a pharaoh in disguise, possibly as Neferneferuton, or even Smenkhare, a mysterious figure whose reign bridged the gap between Akhenaten and Tutankhamun. Her tomb has never been found. Modern scans of Tutankhamun's tomb revealed strange voids, hidden chambers behind its walls. Could one of them hold the lost queen of Amarna, her story sealed away beside her son To this day, archaeologists are still searching for Nefertiti's resting place, a discovery that could rewrite history. The last pharaoh, Cleopatra, centuries later, another queen would rise, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. Unlike her predecessors, Cleopatra lived not in the age of gods, but in the age of empires, when Rome's shadow fell over the Nile. But Cleopatra was no ordinary monarch. She was a diplomat, scholar, and strategist, fluent in several languages, and determined to preserve Egypt's independence. Through her alliances with Julius Caesar, and later Mark Antony, she tried to protect her throne, not with armies, but with intellect and charisma. When her plans failed and Rome conquered Egypt, she chose her own fate. According to legend, Cleopatra ended her life with the bite of an asp. The sacred serpent of Egypt, embracing death as a goddess returning to her divine form. Her tomb, too, has never been found. Archaeologists have searched near Toposiris Magna, west of Alexandria, where underground chambers have been unearthed, but the burial of Cleopatra and Antony remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries. Queens lost to time. For every Hatshepsut or Cleopatra, there were dozens more, Amataosret, and Khasinamuntia, each shaping Egypt's destiny in her own time. Some ruled beside kings, others behind them, and some in their absence. Their stories are written not in books, but in broken hieroglyphs, fragments of jewelry, and half-buried statues. Time erased their names, but not their presence, because in every tomb, every temple, every mural, the power of the Egyptian queen endures as both ruler and symbol of the divine feminine. The legacy of the queens in ancient Egypt. Women were not merely companions to kings, they were the embodiment of Mat, the cosmic balance of order and harmony. To the Egyptians, queens were both mortal and celestial, the living link between Isis and Hathor, between heaven and earth. And though many of their names are lost, their legacy still shapes the very image of Egypt itself, eternal, mysterious, radiant with power. They were the mothers of dynasties, the guardians of temples, and the hearts of empires. Their mystery is not just about lost tombs, it is about how memory itself survives, even when history tries to erase it. The Roman Empire, a civilization that conquered half the world, built wonders in stone, and left behind roads, laws, and languages that still shape our lives today. And yet, even Rome, the eternal empire, was not without its secrets. From forgotten outposts in the desert to strange artifacts buried beneath the streets of its cities, the story of Rome is still unfolding. This is the ancient Roman mystery, the tale of an empire that knew no limits, and of the enigmas it left behind. The empire without boundaries at its height. Rome stretched from the misty hills of Britain to the burning sands of Arabia, from the Rhine and Danube to the coasts of Africa. Its legions marched with discipline, its engineers built aqueducts that defied gravity, and its cities glittered with marble temples and colonnades. To the Romans, it seemed that nothing was beyond their reach. But there were lands even they could not tame, and stories they could not explain. The legion that vanished, one of Rome's greatest unsolved mysteries, began in 53 BC. In the scorching plains of Carthage, where the Roman general Crassus, one of the richest men in history, led 7 legions into battle against the Parthian Empire. The Romans were annihilated. Crassus was killed, his son slain beside him, and 10,000 soldiers disappeared. For centuries, historians wondered what happened to them. Some say they were captured and forced to serve in the Parthian army. Others believe they fled east, marching all the way to the borders of China. Chinese chronicles from the Han Dynasty tell of strange Western soldiers who fought using phalanx formations, unlike any seen before. They were captured and settled in a place called Liqian, in western China, a village where, even today, locals have unusually European features. Could these be the descendants of Rome's lost legion? No one can say for certain. But if true, it would mean the Roman Empire unknowingly touched the edge of Asia centuries before the Silk Road was born. The mystery of the dodecahedron. Across Europe, archaeologists have uncovered another enigma: small bronze objects, perfectly cast, with 12 sides and circular holes, found in Roman ruins from Britain to Hungary. They are known as Roman dodecahedrons, and no one knows what they were for. Over 100 have been discovered, but none are described in Roman texts. Theories range from astronomy to fortune-telling, from measuring devices to candle holders. Some believe they were used to calculate the optimal time for planting crops, aligning sunlight through their holes on specific days of the year. Others think they held religious meaning, tools for priests, symbols of fate. Yet despite endless speculation, their true purpose remains a mystery lost to time. The forgotten machines of Rome. The Romans were not only conquerors, they were engineers of staggering genius. They built cranes capable of lifting entire columns, aqueducts that carried water across mountains, and mechanical devices that mimicked the heavens. Among the strangest discoveries is the Antikythera mechanism, a bronze machine found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. Built in the 1st century BC, with over 30 precision gears, it could track the motion of the planets, predict eclipses, and mark Olympic years. Though likely Greek in origin, the Romans inherited and preserved such knowledge, proof that ancient science reached levels of sophistication we are only now beginning to understand. What other inventions did they create? Inventions lost in the fall of empires, buried in ruins, waiting to be rediscovered. The hidden city beneath Rome, even beneath the modern city of Rome itself, mysteries endure. Archaeologists have uncovered vast networks of tunnels, the catacombs, stretching for miles beneath the streets. But deeper still lie older chambers, pagan sanctuaries, lost temples. and even hidden rivers that once flowed through the heart of the empire. In 2022, researchers discovered a sealed chamber beneath the ancient forum, containing a stone sarcophagus and a circular shrine. Some believe it to be the Lapis Niger, the legendary tomb of Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome. If true, it would mean that even at the center of the empire, myth and history still intertwine, that Rome's heart still beats with secrets thousands of years old. The fall that changed the world by the 5th century AD, the empire that once ruled the world began to crumble. Barbarians invaded, cities fell, and Rome's light dimmed. Yet its mysteries, its art, its inventions, its lost legions, survived in fragments, scattered across continents. They remind us that no empire, no matter how powerful, escapes time, but also that human brilliance never truly disappears. It only sleeps, waiting to be rediscovered. Legacy of the Eternal City. Even now, more than 1,500 years later, Rome endures, not as an empire of marble and steel, but as an empire of memory. Its ruins still whisper of triumphs and tragedies. Its laws still guide nations. Its spirit still fuels the dream of civilization itself. And in every corner of the world, wherever there is architecture, art, or ambition, the ghost of Rome still stands, watching, silent, eternal. Closing narration from the sailors of Carthage to the kings of Akkad. From the pharaohs of Egypt to the emperors of Rome, humanity has always chased the unknown. We built pyramids to touch the heavens, ships to reach the horizon, and machines to measure the stars. But every discovery brings new mysteries, and every civilization, no matter how great, must one day face the silence of time. Perhaps the greatest secret of all is not what we find in the past, but what the past still sees in us. If you enjoyed this journey through the forgotten corners of our past, make sure to subscribe to Past Check for more cinematic explorations of ancient mysteries, forgotten empires, and biblical history. Leave a comment below, tell us which ancient mystery you'd like to see next, and remember, every story you uncover brings us one step closer to the truth that time tried to hide.